Okay, good evening. Today is our last shiur of the year. Because it was a leap year, this is our 382nd blot from Rosh Hashanah day 1 to the last day of this year. 382 blot. It's rare in 1 year to learn 382 blot. It only happens in every year. Baruch Hashem, we've gotten a lot of learning done. It's mostly Bavas this year. Let's just be honest. I think it's almost all Bavas. But all of the learning that you all do, that we all do, should be a big schus for our families. Maybe even more importantly, it should be a big schus for the shmira of Eretz Yisrael. Although we were in Kedushin?
Yeah, Kedushin.
Those were the days. Although
just yesterday.
Yeah. Although I will say that after today's attack on Klal Yisrael, there was this gorgeous little thing online. Numbers of Israelis killed 0. Number of Palestinians killed 1. Number of Iranians killed 5. It was just a fascinating hafla of a fellow. We're living through miracles, straight up miracles. It's not normal. It has to be. The Mashiach, I want him to come, but I'm enjoying the miracles. My son was sitting on the roof of Aish. He's an Aish Gesher watching these things. He's like, "This is amazing." I'm like, "Get in the shelter." I'm like, "Can we not talk now? There's a missile over my child," So, all right, should be a shmira for all of us. And Mir Hashem, another couple of years to go. We're almost there. We're at the bottom of Tzadi Zayin Amud Beis. We're at the bottom of Tzadi Zayin Amud Beis at the Mishnah, and we will be learning until 4 lines from the bottom of Tzadi Ches Amud Beis. No shiur Wednesday, but we'll have shiur Thursday, Friday, Shabbos, a blot plus each on the average, in order to get us to where we need to be by the end of Shabbos. On Shabbos, it's going to be after 2:30 mincha because of all the drashas. On the days of Rosh Hashanah, it's 45 minutes before mincha each day. Good. The Mishnah says, "Hamocher yayin lechaver v'hichmitz." I'm a wine salesman. I sell you a barrel of wine, and right after it gets into your property, v'hichmitz, it starts to sour. So the halacha is eino chayev ba'achrayuso. The seller, the mocher, is not going to be held accountable. However, v'im yadua sheyeno machmitz, if I as the seller know that this particular type of wine that I make is likely to sour quickly, so then I am on the hook. Then you just sold a lemon. That's like selling a car, that every time your cars break 100,000 miles, they die. And you sold the car at 99, you're a Russia, you're in mekach tos. Same exact thing here. If you're selling wine and you know it's going to turn, you should not be doing that. And if you do, it's a mekach tos. V'im amar lo, if I made a bigger commitment to you, if I said to you, yayin mevusam, top of tzadi chesed aleph, yayin mevusam ani mocher lach, I'm selling you a very aromatic type of wine. The Rashbam on the top of the page explains sheyiskayim kederech hamiskaymin, which is going to be kept for a longer period of time. Chayav lahamid lo ad ha'atzeres. Then the wine has to stay good until the atzeres. Why only until Shavuos? What changes at Shavuos? The weather. Take a look at the Rashbam. Ad ha'atzeres, aval lo min ha'atzeres ve'elach, shechom tkufas tamuz mekalkel afilu yain mevusam. Even wine that's otherwise the more chash of wines, but when the temperature gets hot, that's not good for wine. Again, our wines are so different because they're pasteurized and they're sealed in a bottle, and it's a whole different world. The yashin, if I have a little bit of an older wine, so then mishal ishtaka, then what I'm selling you by definition is a wine from last year. Umiyushan, if I'm selling you a very old wine, that's at least Mishel Gimel Shanim. In our home, I've heard my father say many times when he pours the grape juice, these are wonderful grapes from 2024. Definitely not the aged version. But when a person makes a commitment to sell Miyushan, that means at least 3 years old. The Gemara opens questioning the first statement that we made, that the mocher is off the hook. Amar Rabbi Yossi Reb Chanina, lo shanu ela bekan kanim de lokeach. The only time he's off the hook is if he decanted whatever he had and poured it into the container of the buyer. Aval bekankanim de mocher, but if it's still in the container of the mocher, meaning I'm the mocher and I'm not pouring into your container, I'm giving you a whole barrel. So then Omar Lei, the buyer, the lokeach, can say hachamrach v'hakankanach. Everything is yours. Obviously something is wrong here, and you should repay me. Says the Gemara, "V'chi kankanim de mocher my have." Who cares if they're the kankanim of the mocher? Who cares if they're in the original barrels? After all, the mocher could make the following claim: Le'malei lo ibaylach lishuye. I didn't sell you wine for you to keep it in your cellar and not drink it. I sold it to you to drink. I'm not a wholesaler. I'm selling to you to drink. You kept it too long. This is your problem, not my problem. Says the Gemara, lo tzricha to amar le mikba. No, the reason over here why the mocher can't say that is because the buyer said, you're right, I'm not storing it, but I'm only using this wine for cooking. Maybe the guy didn't like wine, but he did like the way that it impacted the flavoring of his food. So that was our case over here, that we're dealing with a case where the barrel belonged to the mocher, but it was lemikba. That's what the Gemara says. Says the Gemara, Umay dochke, why is it that we said that Rabbi Yossi Reb Chanina, this first answer that we saw in the Gemara is leukma lemasnisin bekankanim delokach uda amar le'lemikba. Why did we have to establish our Mishnah to be a case where the kankanim were of the lokeach, then he would be chayiv, and the amar le'lemikba, and that it was going to be for cooking wine? Lukma, we could have done something a little different. We're about a third of the way down on Tzadi Chesed. Lukma bekankanim democher delo amar le'lemikba. Maybe, perhaps what we could do is it could be the kankanim of the mocher. We could have assumed that the initial, the wine stayed in its initial barrel. Udelo amar le'lemikba, and it was going to be eaten quickly. But there, we would have said you're still pater. The mocher is still pater. So says the Gemara, Amar Rava. The reason why we couldn't say this iteration is because masnisin kshise. There was a difficulty in our Mishnah, and we couldn't say the second version that it was kankanim de mocher. Why couldn't we say it was kankanim de mocher? Because the next line of our Mishnah, which can be found 2 lines from the bottom of Sadi Zayin Beis, says, that if in fact we knew that the wine was a wine that was going to turn quickly, and the mocher knew that, then it's a mekach tos. But amai, le malay, if what you're saying is that we have this excuse of lo iboy le lishuye, why didn't we say that? Well, clearly we didn't say that. So in that case of im yadua sheyeno machmitz elolav, it must be shmamina da amar le'lemikba. It must be by definition that the wine is being used for cooking and not for drinking, shmamina. And that was the caveat that was added on our Mishnah, that when do we say that the mocher is going to be eno chai b'achra yuso? That's only true if it's kankanim de lokech, but if it is his own kankanim, then he will be on the hook. Now, all of this answer of Rabbi Yossi Reb Chanina, the caveat that we just learned, is upliga de Reb Chia bar Yosef. Reb Chia bar Yosef disagrees entirely, and this is a shita that we saw already. We saw this a couple of blot ago. What does he hold? Reb Chia bar Yosef, chamra mazla de marigarim. The chamra, the wine, depends on the recipient. Whatever your mazel is, and we saw Rashi a couple of blot ago, if you have a lot of chatayim, your wine's going to turn. So this is already the metaphysical space that wove its way into halacha, that Reb Chia bar Yosef holds that it depends on you, shene'emar, because the pasuk says, this is a pasuk in Chabakuk, v'af ki hayayin boged gever yahir. If you're a gever yahir, if you're a haughty person, so that is going to make your wine turn. And let's learn a little bit of Agadata. Snuck in here for just a little bit. Don't worry, it's only a few lines. Or maybe you should be sad that it's only a few lines, depending on your learning profile. The Gemara says halfway down, 5 lines before the wide lines, Amar Rav Mari, Hai man di yohir. If you have a person who's haughty, is a bal gaiva, afilu a'in she beise lo mikabel. He won't be received well even by his family members. They won't want him to be around. I think that's all pretty obvious, but the Gemara is going to explain a little bit more about this. But before we do that, the Rashbam, 8 lines into the wide line, says that when it says beise, it means ishto. It's a reference to his wife. So what this means, if a person is haughty, his wife will not be makabel him. So the Gemara says, well, how do we know this? Shneimar geber yahir v'lo yinaveh. If a person is haughty, v'lo yinaveh, my v'lo yinaveh, bin naveh shelo, in his own abode, in his own house, he won't be considered accepted. Namely, his wife will be very unhappy with him. Anyone who's ever been married knows that this is the case. It's not the way things work. Maybe in other doros it did. It's not the way things work. You have to be a mensch. You're not supposed to be a Baal Gaiva. And on a similar note, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rab, Kol HaMiskoi b'talis shel Talmid Chacham ve'eino Talmid Chacham. A person who dresses like a Talmid Chacham, even though he's not a Talmid Chacham. You see a regular guy, if you see me walking around in the Dayan's coat, you're like in Rabbi First's outfit, that's not good. That person is never going to be in the mechitza of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You're playing your cards. You're making yourself look more chashuv than you are. That's not right. Because and because of that word association, El Nevei Kodshecha is a HaKadosh Baruch Hu's home, namely his mechitza, which means that if you are a Baal Gaiva and you dress more chashuv than you are, then you will not be in the mechitza of a Kadosh Baruch Hu.
You're trying to motivate yourself to be a higher caliber person.
You don't have to dress that way to do that. You need to dress chashuv, but not over chashuv.
Why do you wear a white shirt and black pants in yeshiva? They tell you to wear that because you're davening to Hashem. You should dress up as if you're going to.
Correct. But that's not a beged of a Talmud Chacham. So that's why I'm saying the long jacket is a better example of like a white shirt. All called the whole Tvutos Klal Yisrael, like the Charles Turret shirt has sold. If only they knew what was going on here, But that's not big day Talmidei Chachamim. That's a Ben Torah, whatever the lashon is. But if I were to show up tomorrow in that long coat, first of all, I get made fun of, which I would deserve. Oh, you would. I disagree with you. You would make fun of me, and I would embrace every word of it.
I think that's a challenge. You should go get for a Bekisha.
On Purim.
No, for a Kippur.
I don't think so. I'll wear a white bekisha tomorrow.
Like Victor Miller said, you say all the Zmiros and Shabbos, it's chashuv enough you could wear a bekisha.
It's not happening. But if I did wear it, I would be in this category of in machnisna somim chitzas. You should be a dayan. You should be on that level. That's shlita. Omar Rava, first of the long lines. Hayman dezavan lechavisa dechamra lechen va. Let's say that I'm a wholesaler, I sell a barrel of wine to a store, but adaita l'sivuye. The intention was that it would be doled out to customers 1 cup at a time, and it would be a very slow dispersal. And you really own it. I'm just helping you sell it, right? So you come to me, you say, Phil, I want to sell something in your store. Wine. I say, okay, you can sell it in the store. Every cup that sells, we'll split the profits, whatever our deal is. And then v'takif apalga o atilsa. And then about halfway down, or a third of the way down, it spoils. Okay, so who's responsible now? I don't own the barrel. You own the barrel. You asked me to sell it for you. We agreed to a 50-50 split, but if you were just to say, who's the owner? It's not me. So the halacha is dinahu d'mekava laminei. The halacha is that the original owner is the one who loses. I never bought in. I'm not your partner. I don't own part of the barrel. I've enabled you to sell. That's what the Gemara says. Below Amranella delo shani bebarza. That's only true if you don't change out the spigot. Abal shani bebarza lo. But if the spigot changed, then that has an impact on it. Metals have impact. Whatever the details are. Below Amran as well. Another caveat al delo mata yoma deshuka. That's only true if the market, if the busy days haven't showed up yet. Abal mata yoma deshuka lo. But if there was a market day and you gave me your bail and I didn't sell it out, that's my fault. I didn't try hard enough to sell your product. That's on me. 5 lines from the bottom. Hayman de kabil chamra adaita de mematele leparvasa de valshafat. I accepted upon myself a barrel from you. So you're the wholesaler. You give me a barrel, and I'm only allowed to sell it in the parvasa, which is a port. Very similar letters. Pei, resh, vav, sav, P-O-R-T. Very similar. I presume it's probably French. There's probably something going on there. I don't really know, but I'm sure it's similar. And the name of the location was Val Shafat or Zol Shvat, whatever the name was. Va'adamati hasam zal. By the time I got there with your barrel to sell it so that we could both make a couple bucks, the market value went down. I wasn't able to profit any money. Dina hu de mekabele. The halacha is that the original owner is the one who's on the hook. Why? Because you didn't let me sell it along the way. You only let me sell it in one place. And because you only let me sell it in one place, that meant that I was limited on my pool of people to sell to. And because that is the case, that's why I didn't sell. What if in fact it really became very vinegary? So Amar le Rav Hillel le Rav Ashi ki havon be Rav Kahana Amar lon chalalo. The halacha is that by chala we would not say that the burden falls exclusively on the wholesaler, on the original owner, but rather that would be 50-50. Udelo ke Rav Yossi Reb Chanina. This is not like Rav Yossi Reb Chanina, who we started with at the top of the page. V'ika da'amri, there are those who argue with this approach of Rav Hillel, and they say, afilu cholanami mekabel, even when it comes to wine that's completely turned to vinegar, the original owner is on the hook. Kiman, that is Rav Yossi Reb Chanina at the top of the page. If we had an extra 5 minutes, we could weave this together in a perfect bow. It is actually quite beautiful when you see it in its perfect form, kaftor v'ferach, but that is how the Gemara concludes over here. And at the very bottom line of Tzadi Chesed Aleph, the Gemara speaks about the next part of the Mishnah of Yoshan Mishel Ishtakad. We said that if you say you're selling old wine, then it has to be grapes from last year. And really, this is actually not going on that. It's going on the next line, which is umiyushan. So there, Tana, the Brisa says umiyashin v'holech ad hachag. It needs to be ad hachag. So from the harvest to the chag is going to be exactly 3 years. That means that this wine is 3 years old. That's what miyushan wine means. Masnisa, the next Mishnah teaches us, if I sell a place to you, or if I accept upon myself to work your field, makom mechavero, and what am I doing with this field? Lasos lo beis chasnus livno. I'm building a place for my son to live attached to my house. That is some helicopter parenting right there. You get married, sweetheart, guess where you're living? I'm going to build a little attachment to the house.
Keep in mind who's built.
Yeah, that's true. I guess he who's paying the rent gets to make the determinations. So beis chasnus livno or Rachman litzlan beis almanos levito, that if Rachman litzlan, a woman gets married and her husband dies, so the father is going to build a room for that child, for that daughter off the house. So what's the measurements of this house? If you want to feel good about how big your homes are, the Gemara says Bona arba amos al sheish. That's, what is that? That's 6 feet by 6 feet by 9 feet. It's a very, very small spot. Divrei Rabbi Akiva.
Yeah, it's a big dog house.
The big dog house. Yeah.
That's my first bedroom we got married.
It's tiny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That in the wardrobe.
Yeah, very tiny.
You're smoking a pancake.
Rabbi Shmuel Omer, Refes Bakar Hizu. This amount is the size of a Refes Bakar. This is, we don't know yet what this means. We'll have to see what it means in the Gemara. And then, we don't know who the author is of this line. The Gemara will debate this. Actually, let me just learn one Rashbam with you, sorry. When Rabbi Shmuel says Refes Bakar Hizu, look a third of the way down. Dibra Maschel Refes Bakar Hizu at the beginning of the line. He says that that size of 4 by 6 is too small, and you need to build something bigger. Umihu lo chashash lefari shiur. The Rashbam says that Rabbi Shmuel didn't even bother saying how big of a place he wanted it to be. It just needed to be bigger than 4 by 6. It's just really small, really small. Okay, next. Harotze lasos refes bakar. If a person does in fact want to build a refes bakar, bona dalat amos al sheish, it should be 4 by 6. If he says he's going to build a bayis katan, that's sheish al ches, sheish al shmona. Gadol ches. If you're building a big house, it should be ches al eser 8 by 10. If you're building a traklin, it should be yud al yud. Our standards have changed drastically over the years. You know, we buy your average house in West Rogers Park, it's 1,600, 1,800 square feet, 2,400, whatever. These numbers are completely ridiculous based on what they used to have in the past. Then the Gemara gets a little bit mathematical. Rumo, the height of the building that you're building for all of these buildings is kechatzi arko u kechatzi rachbo. The height is a math equation. You take the length and the width and add them together, and you divide by 2. So let's say you have a house that's 7 by 5. So 7 plus 5 is 12, divided by 2 is 6. So the height has to be 6. Whatever the length plus width is divided by 2 will be the height. So if it's 10 by 10, 10 plus 10 is 20, divided by 2 is 10. So then the height's going to be 10. Raya l'davar, where do we see this? Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, kibinyan heichal. The Kodesh HaKodashim had the dimensions of 40 by 20. So if length plus width divided by 2, 40 plus 20 is 60, divided by 2 is 30. That's taka, the height of the Kodesh. So that's where the Gemara brings a raya from for this mathematical formula. That if you're going to be building a house for someone or a refes, whatever it is, the formula is length plus width divided by 2 equals height. The Gemara was a little bit bothered by the fact that when the Mishnah gave an example of the little little building that they were going to build off the side, why were we gender specific? Listen, you should have said beis chasnus livno ulvito, ubeis almanos livno vito. Why did we? It could be any iteration. We're not worried about who lives where. Says the Gemara, not so pashut. Milsa agav urche kamashmalan. We're actually learning a very important side halacha. Third of the way down, 5 lines into the wide lines. Delo darka dechasna lemedar bechamua. It's inappropriate for a son-in-law to live in the same home as his mother-in-law. We're not talking about hilchos yichud pashut. That's its own issur. We're saying even if there's other people there, it's not. And if your wife is not there and you are, that's, I don't mean as a visit, but to live in that house is considered inappropriate.
The houses are so smaller, so.
Yeah. Yeah, you're living in if it's Dalid by Vav,
It's like,
and it's husband, wife, and the stepson of the dead daughter, like it's not good. Son-in-law, I should say, not stepson. All right, what's the Mari Makom here? K'dichsi b'sefer ben Sira, like it is written in the Sefer, which is referred to as ben Sira, which has come up a few times in Shas. Let's see if the Rashba makes mention of it. I don't think he did. No, he doesn't. Anyways, it says in this Sefer, Akol shakalti b'kaf moznai. I've measured everything on the scales of justice. V'lo matzasi kal misubin. I haven't found many things that are less chashuv than subin, which is bran. The kalmi subin, one thing that is less chashuv than subin is chasan hadar beveis chamav. That's really not chashuv. You really should not be doing that. The kalmi chasan, even more lenient than that, even less chashuv than that, is oreach machnis oreach. If you invite me to your house and I bring a guest that you didn't invite, Rob invites me over, I'm like, oh, thank you for having me. I brought Mark. You know? So the Gemara says you should not bring Mark to the house. That's basically the point. The kalme oreach, what's worse than that? Is Meshiv Davar B'Terem Yishma, when a person answers a question before the question is finalized. Shneimar, Meshiv Davar B'Terem Yishma, Avelas Hilo Uchlima. If a person responds to a question before he finishes hearing the question, he's done something wrong, and it's a klima, it's a busha. You should not be doing that.
My wife always says I do.
What?
My wife always says I do it. I always start answering. Okay,
Yeah. Many
I
people
learn
do.
more. I could be a better friend.
Yeah, that's right. You should tell her, as long as she lets you out of the house, you'll learn more. You'll stop talking back to her. You know? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Shmuel, Omar, quoting the din that we saw against our Tanakama, Rabbi Shmuel did not like the fact that the Beis Chasnus or Beis Almanus was only Dalet al Vav. He said that's a Refes Bakar, that doesn't even count, it has to be bigger. And then the next line, which we're going to actually refer to now, was Harotza Lasos Refes Bakar, the first of the long lines there. We didn't know who authored that. Rabbi Shmuel, Omer Refes Bakari, Bakarizu, and then Harotza Lasos. Refes Bakar Man Katanil. Who's teaching us that din? Ika da Amar Rabbi Shmuel Katanila. That really Rabbi Shmuel is the author. Ika da Amar Rabbi Akiva Katanila. It just depends. We could make it fit according to everybody. Ika da Amar Rabbi Akiva Katanila. Maybe Rabbi Akiva is the author. Bachi Kamar. Refes Bakar. He Pa'amim Shadam Osadi Raso Refes Bakar. You could make it whatever size you want. It doesn't matter. 4x6 is fine. You'll make it. You don't need to live in a big house. Because the Amar Rabbi Shmuel, really it is Rabbi Shmuel. But that doesn't qualify for the base chasnus or for the base avilus. That's not right. It's too small. Traklin Yud al Yud. What was this a reference to? My traklin. Traklin is typically referred to as a big room. Says the Gemara Kubasa Bevardi. The Kubasa Bevardi was like a large room with rows of roses. Had a lot of roses in it. It was kind of like a chill room, some kind of relaxing room. Tani, we have a brayse of a kantir. If you have a room that's kantir, we don't yet know what this is. The kantir is shtei masrei al yud beis. Why does the Gemara keep doing that? It keeps flipping between spelling out the words and writing a letter. I think it did it in every case. And the Mishnah did dalid al sheish, sheish al ches, ches al eser, except for yud by yud. Why? Never. Why is that?
The 2 years Hashem's name. I'm guessing.
No, that doesn't answer the question. Over here too. I don't know why they did that. Okay, it's definitely a side question. Okay, my kantir, what kind of room is a kantir? Says the Gemara Tarbit Zapadni. It is a courtyard of some kind in front of a palace. That has to be at least 12 by 12. Let's talk about the math equation. We said rumo kechatzi orko ukechatzi rochbo. We said that there was a math formula that the height of the house that you're building on is equal to length plus width divided by 2. So if you have a house that's 10 by 10, so then that's 20 divided by 2. The height has to be 10. Says the Gemara, Raya L'davar, we said Rashba Gomer Kibinyan HaHayecha. Says the Gemara, Raya L'davar Man Tanila. In our Mishnah, when we brought the Raya of the Heichal, who taught it? Says the Gemara, Ika Amar Rashba Tanila. Some say Rashba taught it. Vachi Kamar. Raya L'davar Minayin. Where do we see this from? In Amar Rashbaga, Kol Kibinyan Heichal. That was the way we learned. Oh, because we saw that the Heichal used that same exact formula. It was 40 by 20. When you add those two, that's 60 divided by 2 is 30. That was the height. However, Vika da Amar Tanakamak Tanila, that this is actually not what's going on. The Rashbagat Mohi Kamatama. He's saying, what are you talking about? Vachi Amar Le, the Tanakama. Raya minayin mi binyan heichal atu kule alma ki binyan heichal avde. You're right that the math works, but nobody builds their house at home like the heichal. That's just not the way we do math. So it's ridiculous that you made that comparison. So now we see a very different way to learn our Mishnah. We're not sure how to properly learn our Mishnah. Lastly, for today, and then we'll conclude in just two more lines. Tanya, we have a brisa. Acherim omrim rumo kekorosav, that the height should be like the beams. So that's odd because the beams go across the roof to make the roof. So it says the Gemara, V'lema rumo kirachbo. That's the same thing as saying the width of the house, because you take a beam and you lay it across the two sides of the east and west sides of the house. You lay the beam across. So why is it that you didn't say rumo kirochbo? Why did you say that it's kikorosav? So the Gemara says, besa me iloi rabach. A house is more spacious at the top. In order for the houses that they had to stand a little bit better, our houses are built more sophisticated. But what they would do is they would put bigger bricks at the bottom and narrower bricks at the top. So the bottom was narrower and the top was wider. So it says the Gemara, we wanted it to be like the beams, which were a little bit longer than the house, and not necessarily like the measure between one wall and the next. Some say no, it's because the walls had a little space of an insert for where the pieces of wood would rest. So if you had a beam that would go across, there was a little cutout in the wall, and then the beam would fit perfectly there. We don't want to measure to the walls. We want to measure to the beams. That's how we want the house to be a little bit taller. So that's what the Gemara says is what the Brisa means when it says rumo kikoroso. We'll stop right here at Rabbi Chanina. And on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, we'll come back together and learn the first 45 minutes, the first blot of the next year. Wishing well, a good Geben Shiur to you and your families. Have a beautiful night.